The air on ZYLM hung thick with dust, a perpetual twilight that never brightened a day nor deepened a night. Dr. Elias Cole squinted through the viewport of his research station, watching another swirl of particles dance across the barren landscape. 3 months into his observation mission, and the monotony had settled into his bones like the dust that crept into every crevice of his equipment. Record environmental log, day 92, he muttered into his wrist device. Atmospheric particulate density increased by 12% since yesterday. Visibility down to 400 meters. No significant biological activity detected in Quadrant 7. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. What was the point of all this meticulous data collection? ZYLM was dying. That much had been clear from orbital scans even before he'd landed. His mission was simple. Document the final stages of planetary ecosystem collapse. Observe and report. Do not interfere. The research station, little more than a reinforced metal pod with scientific equipment, hummed around him, the only sound besides the occasional moan of wind against the exterior. He'd chosen this remote location specifically for its isolation, away from the last known settlements of ZYLM's indigenous species. Command had been explicit about minimizing contact. You are there to witness, not to meddle, his supervisor had reminded him during the last transmission. Elias gathered his readings from the atmospheric sampler and headed back inside. In the cramped main compartment, he uploaded the data to his terminal and prepared his daily report. The results were predictable. More toxins in the air, less viable organic matter in the soil samples, lower moisture readings across the board. Another day closer to total ecosystem collapse. He was recalibrating the external sensors when movement caught his eye on the monitor, something large shifting beyond the perimeter of the research station. Elias frowned. The scanner had detected no wildlife in this region for weeks. He adjusted the camera angle, focusing on the disturbance. A figure emerged from the swirling dust, humanoid but clearly not human, moving with a halting, exhausted gait. As it drew closer, Elias could make out more details. Tall and gaunt with iridescent skin that shifted between deep purple and blue even under the layer of dust that covered it. The figure wore tattered clothing and carried something in its arms. Command is going to have my head, Elias muttered, reaching for the emergency protocols guide. But before he could activate any containment measures, the alien approached the exterior sensor array and looked directly into the camera. Its large, faceted eyes blinked once, twice, then raised one hand in what appeared to be a universal gesture of peace. Elias hesitated. Contact with indigenous life forms was strictly forbidden unless initiated by the other party. But this creature had clearly sought him out. Protocol dictated he should alert Command immediately, but something in those alien eyes, a desperate intelligence, made him pause. He made his decision quickly, donned his environmental suit, and cycled through the airlock. The dusty air swirled around him as he emerged, hand instinctively resting on his side where a small defensive weapon was holstered. The alien stood just 10 meters away, swaying slightly. Now Elias could see she was carrying a child, a small, limp form wrapped in some kind of woven material, clutched protectively against her chest. When she spoke, her voice was raspy but clear, the translation module in Elias's suit converting her words after only a slight delay. My milk has dried up, human. My baby hasn't eaten for days. No pleading, no dramatic begging. Just a statement of fact delivered with the flat effect of someone pushed beyond desperation into a numb state of acceptance. Elias froze. This wasn't covered in any of his briefings. He'd been sent to document extinction, not prevent it. Interfering meant violating the core principle of his mission. He began, then stopped. What could he say? Sorry, I'm just here to watch you die. The alien took another stumbling step forward, and he could see now that the child in her arms barely moved. Its color was dull, lacking the iridescent shimmer of the mother's skin. Please, she said simply. Water. Every protocol screamed against it, but Elias found himself gesturing toward the airlock. Come inside. I'll see what I can do. Relief flickered across the alien's features as she followed him, clutching her child closer. The airlock cycled, blowing the worst of the dust from their bodies before the inner door opened. Inside the station's sterile environment, the alien looked even more out of place. Her organic, fluid form a stark contrast to the angular metal and composite materials of human design. "My name is Elias," he said, removing his helmet. "Dr. Elias Cole." The alien nodded slightly. "I am. Omria. This is my daughter, Carrie." The name sounded oddly human when translated, but Elias didn't question it. He gestured to a small bench built into the wall. "Sit, please." Omria lowered herself carefully, never loosening her grip on the child. Up close, Elias could see that Carrie's breathing was shallow and irregular. Her small chest barely rose with each breath. "How long has she been like this?" he asked, already reaching for his medical scanner. 3 cycles, Omria replied. "The water in our settlement turned to poison. Many died. We fled, but there was nothing to eat, nowhere to shelter." She stroked her child's face with long, delicate fingers. "My body could make no more milk." Elias ran the scanner over the child's form. The readings were difficult to interpret. Alien physiology wasn't his specialty, but he recognized severe dehydration and malnutrition when he saw it. "I need to get fluids into her," he said, more to himself than to Omria. "Some kind of intravenous solution." He moved quickly to the medical storage unit, mind racing. Command would recall him immediately if they knew. His mission brief had been explicit: document the decline, maintain minimal impact. He was violating every directive by bringing them inside, let alone treating them. But as he prepared a modified saline solution that he hoped would be compatible with Zilmian physiology, he couldn't bring himself to care. Some principles transcended mission parameters. Omria watched him with unblinking eyes as he returned with a makeshift for setup. "This might help rehydrate her," he explained. "I can't guarantee it won't harm her, but without it, do what you must," Omria said, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. With careful movements, Elias found a suitable vein in the child's arm and inserted the needle. Carrie barely reacted to the prick, a bad sign. He adjusted the flow rate, hoping the solution would be absorbed properly. "Now we wait," he said, sitting back. Omria nodded, her gaze never leaving her child. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the hum of the station's life support systems and the faint beep of the medical monitor Elias had attached to Carrie. "Why did you help us?" Omria finally asked. Elias looked away. How could he explain that he was meant to be a passive observer of her species' extinction? That his organization had deemed Vualem's collapse inevitable, and therefore only worthy of documentation? "It was the right thing to do," he said simply. "Your kind has not always done the right thing for mine," Omria replied, without accusation in her tone. Before Elias could respond, the communication terminal across the room chimed. "Command checking in, right on schedule." If he answered, they would see Omria and Carrie. If he didn't, they would know something was wrong. He crossed to the terminal and disabled the video feed before accepting the call. "Cole here," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Dr. Cole," came the crisp voice of Mission Director Vega. "Your daily report is overdue. Is everything functional?" "Yes, Director. Just some dust in the atmospheric sampler. I was in the middle of cleaning it when you called." A pause. "Your biometrics show elevated heart rate and stress indicators, Doctor. Is there something you're not reporting?" "Damn, these monitoring systems. Had a bit of a scare earlier. Thought I saw movement outside, but it was just dust devils. Gets to you after a while, all this isolation." Another pause, longer this time. "Remember your directives, Dr. Cole. You're there to observe, not to engage. Any contact with indigenous life forms must be reported immediately." "I know," Elias interrupted. "There's been no contact, Director. Just dust and dead soil. See that it stays that way. Your extraction is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. The data you're collecting is valuable, but not worth compromising yourself over." Vega out. The terminal went dark. Elias exhaled slowly, aware of Omria's eyes on him. "They do not know we are here," she said. "Not a question." "No," Elias admitted. And they can't know. If they find out, they'll extract me immediately and leave you both here. Why would they do this? How to explain the cold calculus of scientific observation? My people believe that what's happening to ZYLM is natural, inevitable. They want to study it, not change it. Amria's gaze dropped to her child. There is nothing natural about watching your child starve when you have the means to prevent it. The words hit Elias like a physical blow. Images flashed through his mind. Another time, another deathbed. His daughter, Sophie, her small body ravaged by a disease that had emerged from melting permafrost back on Earth. He'd been working on a research station in Antarctica then, too far away to reach her before the end. By the time he'd made it home, there was only a funeral to attend. No, he said quietly. There isn't. A small sound drew their attention. Carrie stirred slightly, her color shifting subtly toward a brighter hue. The 4 was working. She's responding, Elias said, checking the monitor. Her vital signs are strengthening. For the first time, he saw Amria's expression soften with something like hope. She stroked her child's face again, murmuring words in her native language that the translator didn't catch. Elias watched them, knowing he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He was no longer an observer. He was a participant in their survival. And somehow, that felt more right than anything he'd done in years. As Carrie continued to improve over the next hours, Elias prepared a nutrient solution that Amria could feed her. He explained the process carefully, showing Amria how to use the feeding tube he had improvised. This will help her regain strength, he said. But it's temporary. She needs proper nutrition, and you need food and water too. Amria nodded, watching intently as he demonstrated. You risk much to help us. Elias shrugged. I've been following rules and protocols for a long time. Maybe too long. She tilted her head, studying him. You have lost someone. He tensed. How did you know? Your eyes hold the same emptiness mine did when I thought Carrie would die. Elias turned away, busying himself with the medical equipment. My daughter. 5 years ago. I was too far away to help her when she got sick. I am sorry for your pain, Amria said softly. Before he could respond, an alert blared from the main console. Elias rushed over, heart sinking as he read the message. Notice 2 all-field personnel. Due to increasing atmospheric disturbances, all observation missions on ZYLM are being accelerated. Your extraction has been moved up to 72 hours from now. Prepare all critical data and equipment for immediate evacuation. Non-compliance will result in disciplinary action. Attached was a personal note from Director Vega. Dr. Cole, your recent communications and biometric data suggest possible mission drift. Be advised that extraction drones are automated and will retrieve you regardless of your cooperation. Any attempt to bring indigenous life forms aboard will trigger automatic quarantine protocols. Elias stared at the screen, the implications clear. In 3 days, extraction drones would arrive. They would take him, and only him. Amria and Carrie would be left behind on a dying planet. He turned to find Amria watching him, her alien features unreadable. Bad news? She asked. My people are coming for me earlier than planned, he said. In 3 days. Understanding dawned in her eyes. They will not take us with you. No, he admitted. They won't. Amria nodded slowly, resignation settling over her features. Then we thank you for these few days of life you have given my daughter. Her quiet acceptance cut deeper than any protest could have. Elias looked at Carrie, now sleeping peacefully. Her color brightened noticeably from when they'd arrived. I'm not leaving you here, he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. We'll figure something out. Before Amria could respond, the station shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. What is happening? Amria clutched Carrie protectively. Elias checked the external sensors. Dust storm. A big one. He watched the readings climb rapidly. Much bigger than anything I've seen here before. Outside, the world had disappeared into a roiling brown haze. The station creaked and groaned as particles battered against its exterior. Is it safe here? Amria asked, eyes wide. The station is designed to withstand these conditions, Elias replied, though the continued shaking made him less certain. We should move to the inner chamber, just in case. He helped Amria, still carrying Carrie, into the small room that served as his sleeping quarters. It was the most protected area of the station, with no exterior walls. The storm raged through the night, the howling wind audible even through the station's insulation. Communication with command became impossible as the dust interfered with the signal. Elias wasn't sorry for the reprieve. What he didn't expect was the drop in oxygen levels. The station's exterior air intakes had become clogged with fine particulate matter, forcing the life support system to recycle the existing air with decreasing efficiency. By morning, warning alarms were sounding. Oxygen concentration had fallen to critical levels. Carrie was the first to show symptoms. Her breathing became labored, her newly improved color fading back to a dull hue. "What's happening to her?" Amria asked, panic edging into her voice for the first time. Elias checked the environmental readouts. "The oxygen is getting too low. Her system is more vulnerable than ours." He grabbed an emergency oxygen mask. This might help, but it's designed for human physiology. He gently placed the mask over Carrie's face, adjusting the flow to its lowest setting. For a few moments, her breathing seemed to ease, but then she began to convulse. "No, no, no," Elias muttered, quickly removing the mask. Something in the oxygen mixture was reacting badly with her system. Carrie's small body went limp. Amria keened, a high, heartbreaking sound that needed no translation. Acting on instinct, Elias began chest compressions, modified for what he'd observed of Zilmian anatomy. "Come on, little one," he whispered. "Stay with us." Time seemed to stretch as he worked, adjusting pressure and rhythm, occasionally stopping to check for response. Amria watched in silent agony, her hands hovering helplessly. Finally, Carrie gasped, her chest heaving as she drew in a rattling breath. Her color flickered, then stabilized at a pale but present shimmer. Elias slumped back, relief washing over him. "She's still with us," he said hoarsely. Amria reached out, her fingers grazing his arm in what he recognized as a gesture of profound gratitude. The moment was interrupted by a chime from the communication terminal. The storm had abated enough for signals to get through. A message appeared on the screen. "Dr. Cole, your life support systems are showing critical failures. Emergency extraction has been authorized. Drones dispatched. Estamos sortidos. Prepare for immediate evacuation." Elias stared at the message, his mind racing. 18 hours, not 3 days. He had less than a day to decide. Comply with extraction or find another way. He glanced at the oxygen readout. Levels were dangerously low and continuing to drop. The station's systems weren't recovering after the storm damage. A plan began to form in his mind. It was risky, maybe suicidal, but it was the only option he could see that didn't end with abandoning Amria and Carrie. "We can't stay here," he told Amria. "The air systems are failing, and my people are coming sooner than I thought. Where can we go?" Amria asked, cradling Carrie. "The surface is poison. Not everywhere," Elias said, pulling up the geographical survey data on his tablet. "There's a place about 20 kilometers east of here. It was marked on the preliminary scans as having anomalous vegetation readings. I think it might be some kind of greenhouse dome, maybe from an earlier settlement or research team." 20 kilometers through the dust, Amria said doubtfully. "I have environmental suits," Elias replied. "Mine will fit you, and I can rig a carrier for Carrie with a filtered air supply." He didn't mention what this plan would mean for him. Cutting off communications, abandoning his post, effectively ending his career, and possibly facing charges when he eventually returned to Earth. If he returned. Instead, he focused on gathering supplies, medical equipment, food rations, water purifiers, and anything else they might need to survive. As he worked, he made one last decision. He approached the communication terminal and disabled the tracking beacon that would guide the extraction drones to his location. Then he completely shut down the system. There would be no turning back now. Command would know he had gone rogue, but they wouldn't be able to find him unless they sent a manned search team. Something unlikely given the conditions on ZYLM and the expense involved. "Ready?" he asked Amria, handing her his environmental suit. She nodded, her eyes showing understanding of what he was sacrificing. Ready. They stepped into the airlock together, Carrie secured in an improvised carrier that Elias had fashioned from equipment cases and fabric. The outer door opened to reveal a world transformed. The familiar dusty landscape now buried under drifts of fine particulate matter, like alien snow. Elias consulted his handheld navigator. "This way," he said, pointing east. "Stay close to me. The visibility is still poor." Omria nodded, her face barely visible behind the suit's faceplate. Together, they stepped out into the wasteland. The journey proved even more difficult than Elias had anticipated. The dust drifts were treacherous, sometimes firm enough to walk on, other times swallowing a leg up to the knee. The constant filtering required by their suits' systems drained power faster than expected, forcing them to move at a grueling pace to reach the dome before their air ran out. They walked in silence for the first few hours, conserving energy and air. When they stopped for a brief rest in the lee of a rock formation, Omria checked on Carrie. "She is breathing better," she reported, relief evident in her voice despite the distortion of the suit's communication system. Elias nodded, checking their oxygen levels. "We need to keep moving. We've covered about half the distance, but night will fall soon." The temperature drops significantly after dark. As they continued their journey, the landscape gradually changed. The endless dust plains gave way to more varied terrain, craggy outcroppings and deep fissures in the ground. These features provided some shelter from the constant wind, but made navigation more challenging. Night descended quickly on Zyylem, the diffuse twilight suddenly giving way to near-total darkness. Elias activated the light on his helmet, creating a small cone of visibility in the gloom. "Stay very close," he told Omria. "It's easy to get separated." They picked their way carefully through the broken landscape, the cold intensifying with every passing hour. Carrie had begun to whimper softly in her carrier, the sound piercing even through the suit's insulation. "She's cold," Omria said, her voice tense with worry. Elias checked the carrier's thermal regulation. The heating element is working, but it's struggling against the external temperature. He adjusted the settings, diverting more power to the heating system. "This will help, but means less power for the air filters. We need to find shelter soon." As if in answer to his words, his navigator pinged. They had come within range of their destination. "The dome should be just ahead," he said, relief flooding through him. They crested a small rise, and there it was, a massive structure, half buried in dust, but unmistakably artificial. Its curved surface reflected the light from Elias's helmet, revealing patches of transparency amid the grime. "A greenhouse," he confirmed, "probably abandoned when conditions began to deteriorate." They approached cautiously. The main entrance was buried under years of accumulated dust, but Elias found a maintenance hatch on the upper curve that remained accessible. "Wait here," he told Omria, and carefully climbed up to examine it. The hatch was sealed but not locked. With some effort, he managed to turn the manual release valve. The hatch opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure, revealing darkness beyond. "It's open," he called down to Omria, "and the pressure differential suggests there's still an atmosphere inside." He helped Omria climb up with Carrie, and they entered together, sealing the hatch behind them. They found themselves in a small airlock chamber. Elias checked his atmospheric analyzer. "Oxygen level sufficient," he reported, amazed. "And minimal toxins. Some kind of filtration system must still be working." Cautiously, he removed his helmet. The air that filled his lungs was stale but breathable, with a strange, green scent he hadn't experienced since leaving Earth. "You can take off your helmet," he told Omria, "but let's keep Carrie protected until we're sure it's safe for her." They proceeded through an inner door and into the dome proper. Elias's light revealed a scene that seemed impossible after months on Zylem's barren surface. Plants, withered and struggling, but alive. The dome was filled with rows of vegetation in various states of decline, but undeniably present. "How is this possible?" Omria whispered, reaching out to touch a leaf with reverent fingers. "Automated systems," Elias guessed, spotting machinery along the walls. "Water recycling, artificial lighting, climate control. It's all operating at minimal levels, but it's working. He found a control panel and activated it. Dim lights flickered to life throughout the dome, revealing the full extent of their discovery. The space was vast, perhaps 100 meters across, with concentric circles of planting beds surrounding a central water reservoir. Most of the plants were brown and withered, but pockets of green remained, stubbornly clinging to life. This place was designed to be self-sustaining, Elias explained, reading the system diagnostics. A prototype for long-term habitation. It's been running on emergency power for years. Omria had removed her suit and was now carefully extracting Carrie from her carrier. The child blinked in the dim light, her color already responding to the more oxygen-rich environment. "Can we stay here?" Omria asked. Elias nodded slowly. "I think we have to. Our suits don't have enough power to make it back to the station, and even if they did..." He trailed off, thinking of the extraction drones that would now be searching for him. "Your people will look for you," Omria said, echoing his thoughts. "Yes, but this place doesn't appear on any of their maps. It was just an anomaly in the vegetation scans that I happened to notice." He managed a small smile. "Besides, the dome is partially shielded. It should block most scanning attempts." Omria carried Carrie to the water reservoir at the center of the dome. The liquid within was clear, purified by the dome's still-functioning systems. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the water. "It should be safe," Elias confirmed after checking his analyzer. "The filtration system is working." Omria dipped her fingers into the water and gently moistened Carrie's lips. The child's tongue darted out instinctively, seeking more. "She's thirsty," Omria said, relief and concern mingling in her voice. Elias found a container among their supplies and filled it with water. "Use this. Let her drink slowly." As Omria tended to Carrie, Elias explored the dome further. He found living quarters attached to the main greenhouse. Simple, but functional spaces with basic furnishings. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, suggesting the place had been abandoned in haste. "We can set up here," he called to Omria. "There are beds, and I think I can get the environmental systems working at higher capacity." By the time he returned to the central area, Carrie was sitting up in Omria's lap, looking around with curious eyes. Her color had improved dramatically, the iridescent shimmer returning to her skin. "She's better already," Elias observed, smiling. "This place heals," Omria said simply. She hesitated, then added, "But what of you?" "This decision. Your people will not forgive it." Elias sighed, settling down beside them. "Probably not. When I don't show up for extraction, they'll mark me as missing, possibly dead. If I ever go back, there will be consequences." "Why would you do this for strangers?" Omria asked, her large eyes studying him intently. Elias thought of Sophie, of how helpless he had felt when she died, of how he'd thrown himself into work afterward, taking the most isolated assignments, following every rule to numb the pain. "Because I couldn't save someone once," he said quietly, "and I promised myself never to make that mistake again." Omria nodded, understanding in her gaze. "In my culture, we have a saying, to save one life is to birth a star. You have given my daughter stars." The next few days passed in a rhythm of recovery and discovery. Elias worked on restoring the dome systems to full capacity, while Omria tended to Carrie and began reviving the more promising plants. They developed a routine. Mornings were spent on essential maintenance, checking water filtration, adjusting light levels, ensuring the air remained clean. Afternoons were for exploration and improvement, finding ways to strengthen the weak areas of the dome, cataloging the plant species that had survived, discovering what food might be safely grown for both human and Zilmian consumption. Evenings were for rest, for stories. Elias told Omria about Earth, about its blue oceans and varied landscapes. She told him of ZYLM as it once was, green and vibrant, before industrial expansion poisoned the atmosphere and triggered the collapse. Carrie grew stronger each day. Soon she was crawling around the dome, touching plants with wonder, cooing at the play of artificial light through the transparent sections of the ceiling. One evening, as they sat near the central reservoir, Carrie suddenly reached for Elias, her small hands grasping at his fingers. Surprised, he let her take hold, and she pulled herself upright, standing on wobbly legs. "She's never stood before," Omria whispered, eyes wide. Carrie took one uncertain step toward Elias, then another. He held out his arms instinctively, and she tumbled into them with a delighted sound that needed no translation. Something tight inside his chest loosened. For the first time in years, since Sophie's death, he felt a pure, uncomplicated joy. That night, Omria taught him a lullaby from her culture, a soft, undulating melody with words his translator struggled with, but whose meaning he understood nonetheless. A promise of protection, of endurance, of love that outlasts darkness. Together, they sang it to Carrie as she drifted to sleep. Their peace was shattered the next morning by a distant but unmistakable sound, the mechanical hum of drones. Elias rushed to the upper level of the dome, peering through a small viewing port. In the distance, he could see them, 3 extraction drones moving in a search pattern across the landscape. "They're looking for me," he told Omria when he returned downstairs. "They must have widened the search area." Fear flashed across her features. "Will they find us?" "The dome's shielding should block most scans," Elias said, "but if they come close enough for visual identification—" He didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew what would happen. He would be forcibly extracted, and Omria and Carrie would be left behind, or worse, treated as specimens to be studied. They spent the day in tense silence, listening to the drones move closer, then farther away, their search patterns seemingly random, but inexorably covering more territory. By evening, one drone had come close enough that its shadow was visible through the dome's ceiling, a dark shape moving across the artificial sky. "If they find us, you must go with them," Omria said suddenly. "Carrie and I will hide. Perhaps they will only take you and leave us in peace." Elias shook his head. "I won't leave you. You have already given us this place," she insisted. "It is enough to live on." Before he could argue further, a sharp alarm sounded from his tablet, the proximity alert he'd set up to warn of approaching technology. The drone was directly overhead. They froze, watching the ceiling. The drone hovered there for what seemed like an eternity, its sensors presumably scanning the structure below. Then, a crackling sound came from Elias's abandoned communication device. "Dr. Cole, this is Extraction Team Leader. If you can hear this transmission, be advised that we have detected an anomalous structure not on our charts. We are investigating." Elias closed his eyes. This was it. They'd been found. But then, something unexpected happened. The wind picked up, howling around the dome. Another dust storm was building, and rapidly. The drone above them wavered in the strengthening gusts. The voice from the communicator became urgent. "All units, return to base immediately. Category 5 storm approaching. Repeat, all units return to base." The shadow above them moved away, the drone retreating from the approaching storm. Elias and Omria looked at each other, hardly daring to hope. "They're leaving," he whispered. The storm hit with even greater fury than the previous one, battering the dome for hours. But inside, they remained safe, the structure withstanding the onslaught as it had for years. When morning came and the storm subsided, Elias checked the scanner again. No drones. No signals at all. "They've gone," he confirmed, called back by the storm and probably by dwindling resources. Command won't risk more equipment just to find one rogue scientist. Relief washed over Omria's features. "Then we are safe? For now, at least." Elias gazed around the dome, at the plants beginning to thrive under their care, at Carrie playing with a makeshift toy he'd fashioned from spare parts. "I can't go back anyway. This is my home now. You do not regret your choice?" Omria asked softly. Elias shook his head. "My life on Earth. I was just going through the motions. Here, I'm actually living again." Carrie toddled over to them, holding out her toy, a small assembly of gears that spun when she turned a handle. Her color was vibrant now, her eyes bright with curiosity and intelligence. "Did you make that work all by yourself?" Elias asked, kneeling down to her level. Carrie nodded enthusiastically, then launched into a string of sounds that the translator couldn't quite capture, her first attempts at speech. Omria joined them, translating with pride. She says it spins like the stars you promised her. Elias felt a smile spread across his face. A real smile, one that reached his eyes and warmed places long cold. Outside, the planet might be dying, but in here, life continued. They had created something rare and precious. A family, born not of blood, but of choice, of compassion, of a simple human instinct to help rather than merely observe. As Carrie demonstrated her toy, spinning the gears with delighted concentration, Elias caught Omria's gaze over the child's head. No words were needed. They both understood what they had found here, what they had built together in this fragile dome of life amid desolation. Outside, dust swirled across the barren landscape of Zoilm, obscuring the stars. But inside their small world, a new star had been born, a life saved, a future reclaimed. And for now, that was enough. Carrie reached up, taking Elias's hand in one of hers and Omria's in the other, connecting them. The translator wasn't needed for the word she spoke next, her first clear word in any language. Home.